So there's a reason why this show is called Drunken Cryptids, right?
No, folks, he was not kidnapped.
This time, I am drinking something I affectionately refer to as a margarita.
A margarita. Well, tell us about the margarita.
I don't really want to.
Is this 230, 240 pound dude, 6'4", combat wounded soldier, and he is every bit of tough as you can get. And he's got this blanket pulled up to his chin, and he's going, Rick, they're banging on the walls.
The sketchiest one was, we called it the hallway fog. Fog. It's what it looked like. It was like a not top, maybe Ayla shaped size.
And bolted. And she said, no matter what you hear, never go in this room.
Oh, I'd be trying to get in there.
That's a horror movie right
So
And welcome to another episode of the Drunken Cryptids. I am your host, Matthew, and with me this evening is the lovely Ayla.
Hello.
Hello, Ayla. Jacob is not with us this evening. He is in a pool tournament, so wish him the best of luck. And unfortunately, producer Maddie is feeling under the weather, so we're going to hopefully he gets feeling much better here in the next couple of days. However, I do want to give a shout out to blademedia.com. Thanks, Blade, for doing all of our graphics and everything for us. Great job. If you guys need anything done, he is local. He is here in Arkansas. blademedia.com. Great guy. Hard worker. Also, we are going to be at the Arkansas Paranormal Expo in October. That's October 26th to the 27th here in Little Rock at the Military Museum. So we're going to have a booth set up as a vendor, and we will be doing some interviews as well. So come on down and get a chance to meet the Drunken Cryptid crew. We're looking forward to seeing you guys there. And, of course, the outro music is by a dear friend of mine, Kyle Anderson. He is great and wonderful, and when I heard this song, I had to have it on here. I had to. So it's King of the World. It's by Kyle Anderson. You can find him on Spotify, and there'll be links posted as well. Speaking of links, please go to our website, drunkencryptids.com. You can email me at drunkencryptids@gmail.com. Also, we're on Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I think we're on everything, aren't we now? Except for Reddit.
Yeah, Reddit we're not on.
I don't know anything about Reddit, so I don't know anything about the other ones. That's why I have an awesome, support production crew to help me on out. I'm only as successful as they are, so shout out to Ayla, Jacob, and producer Maddie. You guys, I appreciate it. But guys, I do have a special guest for you guys tonight. I think you guys, you're going to be completely blown away and fascinated with their encounters and stuff. So without further ado, I do want to let me back that on up. If you've had an encounter, if you want to share an experience with us, please email me, drunkencryptids@gmail.com. Get a chance to be on the air. Brag to your friends. We get you going. Even if you just need someone to talk to, someone to explain something you had no idea it was about, you'd be surprised what's out there that you've experienced paranormal-wise. Many times I've had people come up to talk to me and say, do you really believe in all this stuff? And I'm like, yep, absolutely. And they go, well, this one time I actually saw this or I heard this. So don't be afraid. You're amongst friends, judgment-free zone. So, on that note, without further ado, I am going to bring a special guest. I have Heidi on tonight. Heidi, how you doing this evening?
So far, so good.
Good. All right, Heidi. Well, I'm assuming you got your cup of coffee in hand?
Absolutely.
Yep, drinking coffee here as well with you, so don't feel too bad on that one. Well, Heidi, I'm going to let you go ahead and run the show for us. I'll let you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'll let you jump right into it.
Well, I was born in Little Rock from an older family that's been in America for a really long time. We started out in the Appalachians Mountains, so a lot of history with us. I'm the only one in my generation that has weird stuff happen like that. There's one in every generation in our family for the last 800 years that I can document.
800 years. That's 800 years. That goes pretty far back.
Yeah. We've got a lot of documentation from Wales, Ireland, England, and Normandy.
That's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
That's really good genealogy research right there.
Well, a lot of it's because they were military. They were all service family members, and it tends to follow the masculine.
Okay.
So, like John Holiday, Captain John Holiday, that helped discover America, that's one of my grandfathers. Like, it's a whole thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I was going to tell you tonight about the first time that it was documented and witnessed that I was different, because it kind of validates the things that happened before that.
Okay.
Because I was so young. This has been going on my whole life.
most of it has.
Right. Well, I had a stepfather and his family. You know, it was the 80s, so nobody wanted kids. We just kind of existed and did our own thing. And I had this pawpaw that would pay attention to me. Every time I saw him, he would give me a quarter, things like that. Taught me to watch football, Ole Miss, you know, the whole thing. And he had throat cancer and lung cancer. And so he had tracheotomy. And nobody could understand him. He refused to use that thing they hold up.
Yeah.
And I could understand him just as well as I can understand you.
So he had a voice box.
Yeah.
So he put like the microphone up to the throat and kind of, yeah.
Yeah, but it was the 80s, so it sounded horrible, robotic. He hated it. So he just refused to use it.
Okay. But you could understand him.
Yes, absolutely. Clear as day. Like, I did not notice a difference. Still to this day, I don't understand what people were talking about. They couldn't understand it.
Do you think maybe you guys were communicating maybe on a little bit of a psychic level?
I'm not really sure. We bonded really, really, really well. He would tell people that I was a good one. He had other grandkids, but because of the family that I came from, I was very quiet, very well spoken, very respectful, lots of manners. Yeah, old family, don't speak unless you're spoken to, don't touch things that don't belong to you. Like, I did all the things.
Okay.
And his grandkids before me were a little bit older than me, and they were raised way more lax than that. So he just kind of appreciated it.
Okay.
And he had a room off to the side from my grandparents' bedroom that he would watch football in. He had a recliner. He had like every National Geographic ever. Literally, I inherited the National Geographics with my son.
My grandparents were the same way. I used to love to read all the National Geographics they had.
Yes. It's pretty wild back in the day. There's some stuff I wasn't allowed to look at. They'd take it away.
Yes, yeah, my grandpa would tease me on those issues.
Oh, yeah. There's so much there that I did, and I would read to them and just all kinds of stuff. I spent a lot of time with my pawpaw just hanging out. And nobody would know where I was. They would just like, where's Heidi? Oh, she's outside. That's it. That's all anybody knew until dark. It was the 80s.
It was the 80s were a great time.
Right? So as he got sicker, he started going to the hospital more. And when he would go to the hospital, I would go across the street because my mom and my stepdad's house was literally right across the street.
Okay, so was this a blood grandparent or a step grandparent?
Step grandparent.
He was step?
Yes.
Huh. Okay.
And so even if he was at the hospital or whatever, the door's always unlocked. I just went in and hung out in his room. Watch TV, flip through National Geographics, whatever. And there's a lot of times when they would come back from doctor's appointments and whatnot, I'd be there waiting and just chilling. Never touched anything I wasn't supposed to, never got in trouble for stuff like that. As long as I stayed out of the act, nobody cared.
It was the 80s.
Well, according to my family, in the attic was red eye and bloody bones. It's an old Appalachian boogeyman to keep kids acting right.
Hold on.
I still don't know what was in the attic.
It was called what?
Red eyes and bloody bones. Bloody bones is his dog.
Hold on. Red eyes and bloody. I'm writing this down.
It's an old Appalachian boogeyman, and that's how you get your kids to act right and not get into stuff.
That is crazy. Okay.
It was the 80s. We just terrified our children. We didn't really nurture them like that.
Like as long as I was home by the time the streetlights came on, I was good. That was it. And my dad's whistle. My dad had a
This was
particular
rural
whistle.
Arkansas.
Oh wow, this was Utah. Two
Yeah,
different
this was
regions.
rural Arkansas. There ain't no street lights.
Yeah, we had in rural Utah we had streetlights, and then we moved into a neighborhood, and with my stepdad, and it was different from having neighbors that were you know quarter mile down the road. Now they're like right next door. It was kind of crazy.
And we didn't get street lights until I was like 8 or 9 when they requested them put in. Like, this was back when party lines were still a thing, and you had to yell at people to get off the phone so you could call somebody. So I was born in '78. So this particular one was 1985. No, 83. 83 is when this happened.
Okay, 1983.
Mm-hmm. So as the cancer progressed and everything, he went to the hospital, and he was there for like a whole week, maybe 2 weeks. I mean, I was 5, so time's kind of. But my mom was sick and everything, and she was aggravated. So I just went outside. I went across the street and went down to Papa's house, and curled up in his recliner, which was huge to me, and like this burgundy red that, by 80s standards, big. By today's standards, it'd be regular sized.
Yeah, well,
I turned on the TV, and I was watching TV, and I heard a door open, and my Papa walked in. And then the TV changed to football. It was Ole Miss playing. I don't know who they were playing, but I knew it was Ole Miss. Papa came in, and he asked me how I was doing, and I told him I was fine, and he told me to scoot over that he wanted to talk to me. I was like, okay. And I scooted over, and he said, listen, I'm not going to be coming home, but I'm going to be here. I'm going to still watch you. I'm still going to be everywhere. Everything's going to be okay. And I was like, well, where are you going? And he goes, just on a little trip. I'm just tired. And it's time for me to go on a visit to a couple of places. But I'll be around, and I won't leave you alone. And I just kind of looked at him, and I was getting kind of upset and kind of teary-eyed. And I was like, but I don't want you to leave. And he goes, well, it's okay. Everybody has to go sometimes, but everybody's never alone, especially if you love each other. It's okay. And I kind of,
yeah.
And he handed me a quarter. He always handed me a quarter. If I gave him a penny, he gave me a nickel. If I gave him a nickel, he gave me a dime. If I gave him a dime, he gave me a quarter. This is how I learned about money. And he just gave me a quarter, and I looked up. I was like, I don't have one. And he goes, it's yours. And I'm like, okay. And he said, well, I have to go, but I love you. And patted me on the head. And he walked out. And I was just so upset. I ran back across the street to my mom. And I was like, Mom, Papa came and he talked to me. And she told me to quit making stuff up. And I was like, no, Mom, Papa was there, and he talked to me, and he said he's leaving, and I can't go with him, and he said that he'll be around. And she just looked at me, and she started to get on to me, but the phone rang. And when the phone rang, she answered the phone, and it was like that one that hangs on the kitchen wall and has like 18 miles of cord.
Yeah, my grandma had one of those.
So she's holding it, and she says hello, and all of a sudden, like, her eyes got really big, her face turned white, and she dropped the phone, and she just looked at me. I thought she was going to get me with it. I was like, And I started backing up, and she goes, tell me what you were saying again. And I told her, and she just kind of sat on the floor. And she goes, he gave you a quarter. I held out my hand. I had the quarter in my hand. And she just goes, oh, okay. You go play. I've got to talk on the phone. And I was like, okay. And from what I understand, right after that, that was the phone call letting my mom know that my pawpaw had passed about 2 minutes previously. That's why she hit the floor like that. She was, whoa. Nobody could have known. The only people that were there at the hospital were my stepdad, his brothers, and my mama. Nobody could have told me. Nobody knew.
Wow.
And then a couple of weeks later, I went back down, and my cousins were sitting in my pawpaw's chair.
Well, let me before we get to the cousin of Papa's chair, I got a few questions real quick for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What happened to the quarter he gave you?
I put it in my piggy bank.
Do you still have it, or?
No, it went into the savings. I had a savings account that I deposited. I had this big mailbox piggy bank that was plastic, and you fill it up, and then you take it up there, and they cut it open and deposit your money.
Right, you probably didn't think about saving that quarter, did you?
I was 5.
Yeah. I wouldn't think about it either at the time. But look, that's what it was like. It's one thing saying on out. It gave you a physical quarter, and something else. Okay, so it was your stepdad's dad. I'm assuming, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did he have that throat cancer before you met him?
Yes.
Okay, so he had it the whole entire time that you knew him.
Yeah, I never knew him without that trach in his throat or anything.
Do you think that maybe he knew that you were, I mean, kind of had some abilities as he had them himself, and that's what made it a little easier for you to understand him and create that little bond between the two of you? That he didn't
I do wonder about that. Before my family got to Arkansas, we were in Alabama and Mississippi. We had a lot of farmland. And his family came from similar areas before he went to war because he was in World War II.
Okay.
And my mama was in Mississippi. And some of our family just kind of traveled through there. We started out way up north and then kind of trickled down, stayed in Kentucky for a long time, like 80 years or something, and then started buying land down in Alabama and moving over to Mississippi, and then from Mississippi to Hope in Texarkana. And I still have family land there.
Okay.
And now for some reason we migrated to Texas. I don't know. I guess we're just going across.
You're trying to be part of Manifest Destiny there, it sounds like.
I don't know.
No, but it just kind of stood out. I mean, that whole scenario, that just like there's something to that with your your pawpaw, and I think he kind of knew maybe that you had those and sensed them, and that's why it was easier for you to.
He knew I could hear him to such a degree that he would get really upset and have fits trying to talk to people. And that there's one time specifically, I was woke up. I was yelled at to wake up in the middle of the night, and I was informed it was 2:00 in the morning, or else I wouldn't have known because I couldn't tell time yet. And they were like, "You need to go downstairs and see what your papa wants." And I was like, "What?" And they were like, "Come on." They picked me up and they carried me across the street. And they set me down in front of Pawpaw, and he's flailing his arms, and he's yelling at me, "They hid all my chocolate cherries. Where are my chocolate-covered cherries?" And I just looked at him, and I'm like, okay. And I looked at my mama, and I go, "What'd you do with his chocolate-covered cherries? You hid them, and he wants them back." And she just looked at me. And she goes, "Are you kidding me?" And she looked at my pawpaw. She said, "Is that what you said?" And he started shaking his head, yes. And they went and got a box and gave them to him. And he took me into the den room there, and he gave me 2 of them, and I fell asleep in the chair.
Wow.
It was just always like that. Like I always knew. Nobody else would. They'd get frustrated, and then they'd go get me. It did not matter, day or night, whatever. And I met him when I was 3. So that'd been going on from 3 to 5.
Wow. That's crazy. But I'm glad he had somebody that could understand him, though.
Yeah, and
I
Didn't
mean,
occur to me until much later that should not, like, it's just so normal. It's like I was going to skip over because I was like, this is just normal to me.
but
Like,
it's not.
yeah, apparently.
It's not normal. I mean, that's why it's called paranormal. And I firmly believe, from, because we talked off air as well a little bit about this, and I firmly believe that your grandpa, I mean, especially when he walked into the room, the channel changed over to a football game of Old Miss, which was his favorite team,
Yeah.
and gives you the quarter, and it was all symbolisms of the bond between. The only thing missing and now apparently is the chocolate covered cherry. I mean,
I eat them every year on his birthday, Christmas, and Easter because that's when he got them.
well, I bet he's happy about that. And of course,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he said too, though, to you as well, that no one is ever alone as long as
Yeah.
you are loved.
I was very unwanted, and I never talked about it because, I was a little kid. But he knew.
I
He
think
knew.
I think he knew more than he's letting on, and unfortunately, he passed away when he did. Because I'm willing to bet he probably could have helped guide you in some of the things that, Again, we've talked off air. He probably could help guide you along in some of the other experiences that take place further in your life. But let's go to the cousins. The cousins get into Papa's recliner.
I had two cousins, one boy, one girl, that were older than me. The girl was the older one. I'm not going to say their names because, we don't talk like that, so I'm not trying to throw them out there. But
Right.
they were sitting in his chair and doing whatever. And I was like, I want to sit down and watch TV. And they were being snarky to me, especially the male cousin. He was always meaner to me. The female cousin kind of wanted to play with me like a doll, so it was okay. But the male one was just always ornery, and he didn't want to let me scoot it back. And he was like, no. And I was standing in front of the chair, and I was like, I want to sit in Papa's chair. Let me sit down with you, please. And he said, I don't have to. And all of a sudden, I saw Papa walk in the room, and he said, tell him, he said his name, to let you sit down, or I'm going to tell him to let you. And I said, okay. And he looked at me and goes, what are you doing? I said, Papa said to let me sit down, or he's going to tell you to let me sit down. And he started making fun of me, and he was like, Papa's gone. He ain't telling me nothing. And Papa used to use the back of his knuckles and bang on the back of the chair if you were sitting in it and he wanted you to get up. And both my cousins felt it. I was in front of the chair. I didn't feel it. And their face turned white. They jumped up. They ran out the room. I was happy with myself. I curled up in the chair. Papa just patted me on the head. He's like, there you go, baby. And he left the room. And I was just like, okay. And then
hold on, I have lots of questions.
Hang on. They had been screaming, yelling in the kitchen, telling Mama. And Mama said something about go on the back porch. And we had this huge, huge back porch. And Mama came in there and she sat down beside me and she said, baby, you were talking to Papa? I said, yeah. She looked at me and she kind of put her arm around me. She said, is he here now? I said, he's right there. And I pointed right beside her. And he was just kind of smiling at her. And she said, can you tell him that I said I love him? And he banged his hand on the back of the chair, and she felt it because I was sitting in her lap, and she felt it. And she just kind of got watery-eyed, but she didn't cry, and she just smiled. And she sat me back down. She's like, okay, baby, you stay here and just hang out with Papa. I'm going to go in the kitchen and make you a sandwich. I was like, okay.
Wow. Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, so hold on. So you physically saw Papa?
Yes, just like I can see anybody else. There was no see-through, no smoky, none of that.
Did he still have the throat cancer in his throat?
I didn't see it. He was just wearing his normal button-up shirts and stuff because he wore flannels.
Right.
And he wore T-shirts. And it was kind of like an over kind of shirt. Like, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like, I can tell you exactly what he was wearing, but I don't remember seeing the hole in his throat or not seeing it.
Okay, that's what I was kind of curious about. And then he just wrapped the back of the recliner to get your cousins out of the chair.
Scared the crap out of him. It was great.
And then, so how did your grandma treat you after this?
Mama and Papa always adored me. I was wanted by them. They're the only ones that did want me around. They're the only ones that I always felt like wanted me. Mama always makes me sandwich up until she passed away a few years ago. Every time she saw me, she made a sandwich and she would give it to me. And she would make it the same way she's made it since I was 3. She always gave me a glass of tea. Even when she had 10 strokes and she could hardly move around the house, she was determined. She was making my sandwich and she was giving me my tea. And she would sit and talk with me.
I bet you were right there trying to help her make the sandwiches, though.
My other family members did that with my mama. I would sneak over there when they weren't there, and she had had so many strokes she wasn't supposed to be around the stove, and she had dementia, so she would forget she's not supposed to be around the stove. And I would bring her back one of the knobs, because as long as I'm there, and then if she got tired, then there's a stool that she kept in the kitchen, and she'd sit on the stool, and she's just so happy about it. And then when she was done, I put the knob back, and she couldn't find it again. She was just so determined that everybody made her feel useless, and I'd be like, I'll come over and fix it. She's like, okay, baby, I'm waiting. I'll drive all the way over there. Okay.
I love hearing the stories of family members who step up for other family members that are going through dementia, do little things like that for them. And I worked for a route business for a number of years, and I watched some of my customers succumb to that illness, and seeing their family members and dealing with them as well, and watching some of them how they would handle it. There'd be a list there and would have my name on it, for Matthew, and then would have their name on it. And so the Matthew list is the one that I would actually order for them, and while they were thinking they were getting their other list, and try to make sure that it was good, or I'd be notified to skip them because they'd forgotten how much they had ordered. And I think that was probably one of the hard ones, was when the daughter pulled me aside and she said, I need you to skip my mom for the next 2 months because they can't fit any more in their freezer because you have filled it. And I felt so bad about that. So I love the fact that you went over there and snuck her the knob and stole the knob with you on the way out the door.
I had the same kind of bond with Mama that I had with Papa, but Mama didn't seem to linger like Papa did.
I think your papa was special. I think he had some kind of abilities and gifts. I think that he knew that about you as well at a young age. From my understanding, sometimes you guys can kind of pick up on each other.
Yeah.
So.
No, the bond with Mama was the same kind of strength, but different. Like when she started getting really bad and declining with the dementia, I have a younger sister that lived there and was her caretaker. And she would cuss my sister one side down the other, just mad, arguing, fighting, because she felt like they were keeping her from doing stuff. And my sister would get so frustrated, she would call me and tell me Mama's cussing and she's throwing a fit, do something. And then she'd put Mama on the phone, and I'd get on the phone with her. I'm like, hey, Mama. And she's like, hey, baby, how are you doing? Like, total change. I can hear her cussing in the background. And she's like, hey, baby, how you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. My sister's telling stories on you. Well, she better not. What's she saying? She said you said bad words. I know, Mama. I told her she lied.
Oh.
So it was the same kind of, and it was just that quick. I could always calm her down. Everything was fine. As soon as she heard my voice, everything was chill. And so it was the same, just kind of different. And she didn't linger Most of her sons had passed away by the time she had passed away. I just feel like she felt like everybody was going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think she just went wherever she was going after a couple of days because I only felt her in the house for like, I went over there 3 times after she passed because she passed at home.
Right.
And I felt her kind of linger just a little bit. And then after her service, I didn't really feel her there anymore. I feel like she had peace. I feel like he was worried about who he was leaving behind.
Yeah. Once I think so, have you felt him since then or no?
When I talk about him, like when I told you this story the first time, and now I get chills and I can feel him tapping on the back of my chair. He's here. I feel presences pretty frequently.
No, then he's still got something left to do with you then apparently, and maybe he has
Anytime I'm upset.
maybe he has had a hand in trying to guide you in some aspects, and sometimes it's like that old joke, a guy's drowning in the water, and somebody comes out there in a boat and says, "Oh, I'm here to help you." He says, "No, I'm praying to God. God's helping me." And so the boat drives off, and next the lifeguard swims out there to help him on out. And says, "No, God's here to help me on out." So no. So the lifeguard disappears, and a helicopter shows up, and so forth and so on. And the guy finally drowns, and he gets to heaven. And he goes, "God, why didn't you save me?" He said, "What do you want? I sent you a boat, a lifeguard, and a helicopter." So,
Right.
I mean, it's just that, and I think that sometimes in our lives that, we don't see sometimes the help and the aid that, what we are being given until we look back, the old saying, hindsight 2020, looking, going, well, that makes sense. And if we can use our hindsight to try and switch it to forward sight and learn from our hindsight, I think that's what makes us, better and more susceptible to, these helpers coming along to help and guide us, whether it be
I
in the
think
form of
so.
God or angels or loved ones that have passed on that are still here with us. So and sometimes I feel that way. I've looked back and realized certain things that I've done and what was happening and the warning signs that I was given, and now I look for those warning signs so those mistakes aren't being made again. You know what I mean?
There's quarters that show up in random places, especially when things are getting tough. Like, I'm not really telling the family business right now, but I'm going through a tough situation at the moment, and there was a quarter just in the middle of the floor, no good reason. And I'm like, oh, okay. Pick up my quarter. I put it in this piggy bank too.
Yeah, that's just his way of letting you know that he's there.
Yeah. The hardest times when I've had 5 near-death experiences, like flatline, like it was bad, but I came back. There's been a quarter in weird places. Like after my motorcycle wreck, when I shattered my arm, there was a quarter sitting on the table, the hospital table. And none of the nurses said anybody had come see me yet. Nobody, like, there's no reason for it to be there.
Well, it's kind of funny you mention that because it just sparked a memory for me. One of my older daughters, she had a friend that had passed away when she was in high school, and she would always say, Daddy, dimes are the dead, communicating to us. And whenever something major was happening, or she'd show up for a visit or something like that, as soon as she would get here, or as soon as I'd pop up there, or something major was happening with the two of us, there'd be a dime. And she would be the one that would see it. I wouldn't see it. And she's, Daddy, look, there's a dime. And she automatically knew who it was from.
That's awesome.
So I do think there's something to those legends, the dimes and everything else like that. I do.
I think you're right. See, I think I talked about this with somebody several years ago. I think it was quarters because that was the highest value denomination I was aware of. I didn't know dollars meant anything yet.
Well, so my great grandpa, he was a step grandpa as well, and he would do the same thing for me and my little sister, except for he did that little magic trick of pulling it behind your ear, right?
Okay.
As a kid. So every time we get ready to leave, he would go, "Oh, wait, come here," and it was always $half. He always carried $half or silver dollars, and so he'd always give us $1 or a $half. It was the '80s. $1 can buy a lot of candy back in the '80s, and even a quarter could buy a lot of candy.
It did. It bought 5 Jolly Ranchers or 3 Laffy Taffies.
I used to buy the candy cigarettes.
I loved those.
We had that
I
little
was so
general.
stressed out. I ate a whole pack.
Yep, we used to crack jokes, and we would ride our bikes down to the general store, and we would get a packet of those chalky candy cigarettes. That was hilarious and nasty.
Terrible. I don't know why it was so cool, but it was terrible.
It was the '80s.
Tasted kind of like flavorless Smarties.
Smarties were a lot better.
They were.
Yeah, but the candy cigarettes I always thought it was like cool. Of course, it was the '80s, man. It was crazy.
It was. Well, so my mom was told about what was going on down there by my mama. And my mom called my grandma. And apparently, this is a bloodline thing on my grandma's side, which is the most highly documented side of my family. And I'm like, that's the holiday side. That's like Doc Holliday is one of my cousins. We share my 6th grandfather. It was his 3rd grandfather. That kind of thing, like Captain John Holiday, like all the holidays folding back into England, like my 12th grandfather was Lord Mayor of London. Like it's a whole thing. And so there was always one.
Well, wasn't
that was
Doc?
kind of the black sheep
Well,
of
wasn't
the family.
well Doc Holliday came out of Georgia.
He did. We had land there for a while.
Okay, so you're related to the Doc Holliday.
Yes, John Doc Holliday.
It's crazy. I got stories about that on other episodes. Go ahead.
So actually, he's another one of the ones like me that was different. But so Grandma knew that there was something different about one person in each generation. At one point, they were revered, and then later they were like, "Oh, that's the weird one. That's the black sheep. Don't hang with that one. Whatever." And at one point, way back in Wales, they were feared. And I'm not really sure why, because the documentation is so sketch. But Grandma had this massive photo album. And it was people that had passed long before I was ever even thought of. Some before my mom was thought of. And Grandma would come and get me, and I'd spend a weekend with her like every other weekend or so, kind of like I do with my grandbabies.
Right.
And so she took me and sat me down over there, and she goes, "Do you want to look at the photos with me?" I was never allowed to touch this book, so yes, I want to look at the photos with you. Like, I was down with this. And this is the grandma that had, like, the cable box when they first came out. She had Fraggle Rock. Like, this was a whole thing. It was a big deal.
Fraggle Rock.
I love that. It's one of my favorites.
I had a nightmare about the Fraggles, by the way, when I was a kid when it came out.
Well, my grandma was very religious later, and she was raised very, very religious Pentecostal, but in between the two, her favorite movie was Dark Crystal. She drank Miller Ponies, and she played the guitar. So
yeah, Dark Crystal was another creepy one.
It was, but it was Grandma's favorite, so it was one of my favorites.
Yeah, Dark Crystal Levine was really it was a creepy one as a kid. There was a lot of shows and movies as kids in the '80s that we watched. It was really kind of creepy, and Fraggle Rock was absolutely innocent. It really was. It was a cute little show, but boy, I tell you what, I had the craziest nightmare about those Fraggles. I could tell you the whole thing to this day. I mean, in perfect detail. It was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
In my little kid mind, those little things were evil.
If it makes you feel better, my favorite was the Dozers.
Yeah, the Dozers.
I just like them minding their own business and building off on the side.
I remember the Dozers.
Well, Grandma pulled out this photo album, which I had inherited after her passing and given to my oldest aunt that's still living right now. But, and she just started flipping through the pages. She never said anybody's name. And it didn't occur to me till later years when it was pointed out to me. She never said anybody's name. She just started flipping pictures from the back. She started from the right and was flipping to the left, going backwards.
That's old Middle Eastern right there. That's old.
Yeah, and so, well, there's some Hebrew bloodlines in my family. There's like 3 different small branches.
I was going to have you mention it because the way she was turning those pages sounds very.
I think it was because the back is where the newer people were. Because in the beginning of it, I would point out, that's Mama. That's you, Grandma. Oh, that's my Aunt so-and-so. That's cousin blah, 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 you know?
Yeah.
I mean, my grandma was one of 12, and all of them had kids, and all of their kids had kids, so I have a really big family. And we used to have family reunions every year, so I knew a lot of them in the beginning. But then she started flipping about the middle, and I didn't know a lot of them. And then it got to hardly knowing any of them. And then you get to some that are very, very, very old, like some of the original pictures taken, like Old West pictures and before, the kind that you'd sit still like 30 minutes to do that people never smile in. And I was like, oh, that's my friend John. That's my old friend. And Grandma looked at me. She said, that's your old friend. I said, yeah, when you and everybody's doing stuff and I'm by myself, he comes and plays with me. I told you about him. She said, you have told me about your old friends. And she said, that's nice. Is he nice to you? I was like, yeah. He's kind of bored sometimes, but he goes, it's okay. So it's okay. And she just kind of snickered and she moved on and she flipped some more pages and I stopped her again. And that's Biddy. That's my other old friend. She said, hang on a minute. And she didn't even know that one. It was somebody that had passed before my grandma was born. She had to pull the picture out and read the back of it to figure out who it was. And it was a great grandmother's sister.
Oh, wow.
And then there was another one, and it was a cousin that had passed away very young. But, I mean, when I say a cousin, I mean like colonial days. And he had passed away doing farm work. I don't really remember the story, but I remember that he had passed away, that he was 8 years old, and that he was doing something with a cotton gin. But I don't know what specifically. I can't remember that.
I think cotton gins actually took a lot of people out back in the day.
Yeah.
Kind of is a new technology for them.
It was like there's still colonial houses everywhere and all of that. In the picture that showed that I knew who he was, there's like a colonial house. And then on the back of his picture, it just said that he had passed in a cotton gin accident. But like I said, we were farmers. We had a lot of land. And as, like, when the Dust Bowl happened, that's part of why we went south. You know, that's how we ended up going south, because we had a massive amount of land in Kentucky and in Illinois and in Ohio. And that all got sold when the family moved way south into the deep south. Okay. And so...
You know, I think we could have like a full episode just on your whole genealogy.
Probably. I would. There's some of it that I don't know that I would want to talk about publicly, but yeah.
we'd have to have you bring all the documents and everything over and do, have you bring it over to the Drunken Cryptids headquarters and, Oh,
I have them. I have either photocopies of them or I have the original copies. I have 2 file cabinets full.
I 100% believe you. I really do. So we're going through the photo booth.
Yeah, and so Grandma told me to go play, which, like I said, 80s kid, highly neglected, go play all the time.
We weren't neglected. We had each other in our imagination. I mean, come on.
I was an only child until my sister was born 5 years later.
All right. Well, apparently you had some ghosts hanging out with you, so.
I did. I had my old friends, and my old friends would play cards with me, and my old friends would play dice with me, and they would poke the things out of my light bright.
That's hilarious. And kind of creepy.
That's what they said too when the grown-ups asked me how they play with me afterward. But Grandma had this really long hallway. I mean, it's not really that long. It was a 3-bedroom house. But in my little brain, that was a long hallway, like kind of sketch. And when they told me to go play, it usually meant I wasn't supposed to be somewhere. So I would sit in the hallway really quietly and see what was going on if I was going to get in trouble for something. If it didn't sound like I was going to get in trouble, I'd go into the room and play. But if it sounded like I was going to get in trouble, I was really good about being very still right there to find out what I did wrong. Because most of the time they didn't tell me. They did just, surprise, you get spanking. You're like, oh, okay. You don't know what's going on. You figure it out. Hardcore 80s kid right there. So I'm sitting in the hallway, and I have my little rag doll, little Raggedy Ann that my grandma had made. And not my grandma, but my great-grandma. And Grandma had called my mom and told my mom the ones that I knew. And she's like, did you ever tell her about them? And my mom's like, who are you talking about? Mom didn't even know. Like, my mom is loud like I'm loud. You can hear her. And Grandma had one of those brand new wireless phones with the cord that's 5 miles long. But it's not a cord, it's like an antenna. Like if you turn wrong, you're going to knock stuff off the wall.
Yeah, you had to pull it out for, yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Almost like a little switch.
yes. But she also couldn't walk like out of the room. It didn't work in other rooms in her house, just the one.
Yeah, the reception on those were horrible.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't allowed to touch it, so I don't know.
Now, they were cool, but the reception was horrible.
That Grandma was telling Mom about it, and Grandma said there's no reason that I should know. And Grandma said that they had died before she was born, and that's when it occurred to me. I was like, what? But they said Pawpaw died too, and he's still around. So I didn't really get that yet, but it stood out. What? When are y'all talking? They're still here. Because, I mean, I played with roly-polies till they died, and they didn't come back. So, I mean, my concept of death was not quite right yet.
Well, for most kids, it's really not there.
Yeah.
Kids don't fully understand or grasp the concept of death and gone for good and forever because, I mean, the only kids really only have, the emotional attachment they have is to like their mom and dad. And, they go to work or, they come back, so which makes a lot of sense, from what you're telling me, that your concept, I mean, you didn't have that full concept there.
Mm-mm.
The mature level, the understanding, the grasp of it. So
I knew the bugs did because, I mean, roly-polies were kind of fun and in my grandma's driveway, so I would play with them until they eventually died of it. And I'm like, oops, my bad. Because they wouldn't play anymore. I'd be like, roll up, and it wouldn't. And so I had that. Like, somebody had explained that to me. I was also a little rough with grasshoppers and crickets.
I used to try and use roly-polies in my BB guns, BBs. I know.
I was just trying to make them roll and quicken them.
No, and then for grasshoppers, I was the kid that was fascinated with all the Discovery Channel shows that weren't Discovery Channel at the time. And so they'd be, nature documentaries that come on TV, anything about the paranormal, supernatural, whatever. And I remember these guys are marking, I can't remember what they were marking, but I got this idea out in the cornfield that I was going to catch all these grasshoppers, and I was going to paint them blue and see kind of like a migratory, trying to do a science experiment, not realizing that grasshoppers don't breathe out of their mouth.
Yeah.
So it didn't turn out very well for the dead blue grasshoppers. But I was always trying to investigate, always trying to find something, always trying to do something new. So, but go ahead, carry on. I apologize. We got off track there about bugs. And if little Ben was around, he'd be all excited.
Oh, that's part of why I love him so much. We can talk for hours about spiders and bugs. It's great.
Yeah, his thing is Minecraft now.
Yeah, that's not me. Well, after that, I went home and my mom pulled out a photo album that was her father's side of the family. And I didn't know anybody. I'd never even met her father. If I did, it was when I was still little. And remember, I'm 5 at this point, so we're talking way little.
Right.
I don't remember him. I have snippet memories of 3 months old and up, and he's in none of them. I don't know that side of the family at all. I didn't learn about them really until I was about 11. And she got really disappointed that I didn't know them, and she never brought it up again. But her and Grandma would occasionally talk about it because of different things I would color, different things I would say. Because once Grandma didn't act like I was making stories up anymore, and she knew that my old friends were really there, I didn't get so secretive about it, because I always thought that they were mad at me when I said something. They would tell me I was making up stories. And Grandma would notice that the air in the room would change. Grandma, and she would audibly say something about, why is it so cold in here? And I'd say something about one of my old friends, and she'd look at me, raise an eyebrow, and walk right back out. She's like, okay. Like, they didn't really know what to do with me, but it was acknowledged.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then it was talked about that I had been talking about my old friends since I was like almost 3 and 3 and up. And it was weirded out about, except my godmother. My godmother was chill as could be about it. She's just like, yep, that happened. It's cool. And my mom and my godmother would talk about, my godmother was a preacher's kid. And she was like, stuff like that happens. It's fine. And they're Scandinavian. She's like, you'd be surprised what our kids do. It's fine. And it was never mentioned again around my mother. Around my grandmother and around my mama, it was no big deal, but it was like, don't talk about that in certain places, in public, in certain people's presence. Like, you just knew it wasn't something to be told about or for everybody to know.
Okay, let me pause you real quick. So your mom, your mom didn't believe you or know anything about this stuff.
My mom believed in the supernatural. Actually, she was avid about aliens and stuff like that. She was a Trekkie the whole bit. But I don't know if it was because she was one of the people that the doctors did way more than they should have and ended up with an opiate addiction in the 80s and 90s, or if it was because she was offended that I didn't know her dad. I'm not really sure. My mom is a hard one to peg down because she was a really amazing mom for about the first 8 years. From 8 to 10, she was a really good mom, and then there was a rapid decline.
Okay.
And she didn't even like me after that. She didn't like anybody.
Yeah.
I don't think she even liked herself after I turned 10.
Yeah, unfortunately, those controlled substances can do that.
Yeah.
That's
She
sad.
never denied what I did. She never denied what I can do. She just was uninterested. Nobody had a problem with it until about the time I really came into the ability and the knowledge of how that I could control aspects of it, that I'd have to talk to every entity that showed up, things like that, that I could ask them to come and go.
Well, tell us some of the let me hear some of those encounters.
School was hard. Bad things were happening at home across the board. And I wasn't as friendly and as open as you would think I would be. My personality didn't quite shine like that because I had learning disabilities. They were putting me on every kind of ADHD med you could, which I legitimately have ADHD, but they went way too far with that. And it would give me all these weird side effects, like I would pass out, I'd sleep in class, all kinds of stuff. And it was the 80s, so you just passed them on and you didn't really deal with it or anything. So my classmates kind of knew I was weird, but they thought I was weird for different reasons. And so if I was alone on the playground or whatever, or I was alone outside because I got put outside in the hallway a lot, or I get sent to the principal's office or the counselor's office for nodding off in class, or for being so wound up that I'd grind my teeth and it would irritate my teachers. And I'd just get really lonely and I'd start getting upset. And I'm like, I wish one of my friends were here. And then you could audibly hear them, or I could, walking down the hallway. And I'd look up and it would be one of what would be my ancestors, or in extreme times, it would be my papa. And they would just sit with me and tell me it's going to be okay. This won't last like this for long. Everything's going to change. You're going to grow up and you won't have to deal with this. It's okay. This is just for a minute. And I was told a lot. This is just for a minute. It's okay. And I'd be like, okay.
So when did you?
And, I mean,
so
I had friends. I had a lot of classmates that I was friends with. It's just I didn't want to tell anybody what was going on.
about what age was it that you started learning how to control this? Did anybody teach you how to do this, or I mean,
I asked one of my ancestors. There's one, and it's the boy, the young boy.
Okay, so let me hold on. All right, so you talked to the dead on how to control this ability.
Yes.
Oh, go on, please.
Well, I told him that I didn't like it, and he said, why? And I was like, because it's very distracting, and I get in trouble all the time at school anyway, because I have such a hard time, and I just wish that they would leave me alone sometimes. And he goes, so tell them to. And I was like, you can do that? He goes, yeah.
Okay, so you're having full-blown conversations with somebody dead.
Yes.
Did you ask him what it was like?
Yeah. He said it's just kind of different places. He said it's hard to explain, that you go to different places, that it's like here, but it's not like here.
What about going to the light?
He said not everybody does. That you don't have to.
Why did you ask him why? Did you ask him why he didn't go?
Because he wasn't done yet. Come to think of it, I probably should have questioned that more.
Yeah. See, I have a lot of questions on that one too. It's like, okay, I have so many questions to ask this guy.
Well, it depends on which one you ask, because they had different answers. Papa said because I needed him, and he said he was waiting on Mama.
Yeah, but she's already passed and moved on, though.
Yeah, but he doesn't show up in full. He just knocks. He doesn't come like that unless it's really, really bad, unless I'm in serious distress. Like, really, really serious distress. Like, the last time I actually fully saw him, my son was in an accident that he was in a vehicle that rolled over 6-7 times. And I was on my way to the hospital, and Pawpaw showed up in the seat next to me. And he told me to calm down and to breathe, and that Joshua was okay. Oops, sorry. That my son is okay, and that I just need to breathe, because if I get hurt in an accident, it's not going to make it any better, and I can't take care of anybody if I don't take care of myself.
It's true.
And then he started singing this old song, and it was soothing. And I asked one of my uncles about it, because my uncle had been in the military, and my papa, it felt like a military song, but I wasn't really sure, but it really sounds like a kind of Navy Army song.
Okay. Like a
And
cadence?
say that again.
A cadence? Like an army cadence?
Yeah,
Like, here we go again.
yes.
Same
It's
old
like
stuff again. Marching down the avenue. There you go. I got a little army cadence out of me.
yeah, sort of like that, except like talking about something about Germans or something. Like the word Germans was in it. It's been a while. I mean, that accident was like 2018, I want to say. So, like, I can't tell you all the words anymore. But when I was talking to my uncle, I remembered snippets of words, and he was like, "That's a legitimate song." And I was like, "From where?" And he's like, "World War II." And I'm like, "Well, you're not that old. Why do you know?" He goes, "Because I hang out at the VA." And I'm like, okay. And it was kind of left at that. My uncle knows I'm weird. That's what he calls it. Everybody just says I'm weird, and we roll with that. So he never questioned it. He was just like, yeah, that was one of those things they did in World War II. You're fine.
Right.
It was comforting because you could breathe to it. It's kind of like when you're doing CPR and you're like, staying alive, staying alive. It's kind of the same thing. It had such a motion to it, a flow to it, that I could breathe and calm my mind and calm my breathing to get to my son. And then when I got to the hospital, I parked, and he had his hand on my shoulder walking me into the hospital. And it was UAMS in Little Rock. And then as I walked through the doors, he just dissipated. Which is probably the weirdest part to me, is when they dissipate, because I can see them as clearly as I can see you, and it's like they just fade away. It's not like cool or anything. It's not like Avengers, or they just kind of fade.
And I'm trying to get my head wrapped around all that. I mean, that's the fading away. I still want to go back to the young kid, the colonial kid, having a full blown conversation, and I mean, teaching you how to use this stuff.
He showed up a few more times. He showed up to tell me that I could tell them to come and go. And I practiced that for a while, and that was neat. And it's apparently bloodline. You can't do that with everybody, but you can do that with bloodline people, because they're your ancestors and there's supposed to be a level of respect. And if you tell an ancestor you don't want to ever talk to them again, then they go away for good and they never come back. Even if you call them, they don't answer.
Well, can you see and pull up people other than your ancestor?
I can feel them. And so I read tarot cards. I have a pendulum. I have dowsing rods. People like me kind of get drug in and exploited to a degree by ghost hunter groups when they're very little and very young. And I was out on my own. I was emancipated at 14 and a half, almost 15. So there was no grown up to tell me that they're using me or anything. They were totally making money off me, and I didn't know it. But they would find different people, and I was one of them. There were 3 of us that can see things and hear things and feel things. And then if there was any kind of report, especially in certain counties, then we would go. And I would walk up and I can feel it. And when I'm doing readings on people, if there's somebody with them, I can feel it. I can't see them. I used to could, but one time it scared me really bad. And I screamed, I don't want to see this anymore. And I never could see others again like that. But I can feel their presence. I can feel if they bear me ill will or not. I can feel like different strengths. If they're newer, they're very strong. If they're older, they feel kind of weaker. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can hear audible words every now and then, but it's not like a full-blown conversation like it was. It's just certain words, just snippets. Like, I was determined that somebody was a good person and that they were a friend of mine. And I kept hearing them just every now and then, especially when something was said that I would later find out was untrue or ungenuine. And they would be like manipulator, liar, deceiver.
Almost kind
And
of
it
like
would just be one word.
almost like a spirit box talking to you.
Yeah, but it's just the one word. It's like very nondescript. That doesn't give you a, well, who? If you're in a group of people, are what? Who? This is complicated. So it's like kind of difficult, kind of not. When I'm alone and doing readings, it's not complicated because there's only one person that can be talking about. It's easier to deduce. When you're in a crowd or a large gathering and you just start hearing random words, it's very unsettling and it's disorienting to the point I don't really like large crowds. It has to be really worth it for me to go to like a concert or something like that. Like, I have to really like that band or I'm not going.
Yeah, I could see how that could be a problem for you, especially going to concerts and stuff.
It is. I mean, I still like concerts, don't get me wrong, but it has to be worth it. It has to be worth the anxiety and me building myself up and doing all the grounding and centering and meditating and building up the will to go. And I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. It takes me about 2 weeks to go to an event that I want to go to.
I get that completely. Well,
If you invite me somewhere tomorrow, I'm not coming.
well, I do know that you
tell me 2 weeks in advance. I'm like, oh, okay.
there's a lot of with I had the same issues for the longest time, and I had a good friend that took except for mine wasn't paranormal related, but it took a good friend quite a while to finally kind of and working with me and pulling me on out, and I was able to do lots of crowds and go to shows and concerts and was able to enjoy. And then when when COVID hit and everything shut down forever, and my first concert after COVID was last year, I believe it was, and it was I probably would enjoy the concert a lot more had had it been before 2020. And so I'm slowly getting myself back out there again and trying to get adjusted to the crowds and everything else like that. But I do so. Yeah, I know you have some interesting encounters coming on up further down the road for you in the we talked about a part two when you got older and dealing with some really dark forces and such. Am I correct?
Yes, I married into a family that did a lot of things, and you wouldn't like you had an inclination, but you didn't know until you knew. And one of them, for some reason, protected me and taught me a lot. And so I ended up being mentored by a well known in that kind of community witch who happened to come from a family that practiced necromancy. And I
Oh,
didn't know it. I didn't know it until I knew it, and then I got out.
well, I'm going to get ready to pause you on the whole thing right there because I know that you've got something coming on up here in a few minutes that you've got to get to, and we would probably talk for another 2 hours about this. But I do want to state though the fact that on that token right there, being a kid from Utah, growing up and everything, and growing up the way I did, and seeing the stuff on TV and fascinated with all the supernatural and everything, it always seemed a lot surreal. And I had my own experiences growing on up. Lived in a haunted house, crazy, weird things. Seeing shadow people, weird things, and all that stuff. But it didn't, like what you just talked about, the family that you married into, your exes and stuff, but that's really out there. There is more of it there. And I learned this from my time in the service, and encountering, I remember I met my first Satanist while I was, at my first duty station, and I was blown away And I picked his brain. I spent a full day picking this guy's brain because to me it was so surreal that, the paranormal is out there and paranormal is real, but never gathered that it was this big.
Yes.
And it's a bigger world than a lot of people think that it is, and a lot of crazier things happen than a lot of people realize. The old saying they say is, I think you pass 7 serial killers in your life, they say.
Yes.
Or something like that, yeah, and not even realizing it. And then...
Well, the thing is that there's rules, and they're just now being broken. You have to remember, people like me have been hunted. We've been exterminated throughout centuries. So the rules where you don't talk about it, you don't do it publicly. Like, it is so wild to me because I come from the last generation of shut up and be quiet about it. And so, although I'm mentoring and I'm public now, it is very uncomfortable because I'm always looking over my shoulder. History repeats itself. That's been beaten into me all along. To know, to practice, and to keep silent is the rule that has been passed down through centuries.
Well, then I definitely appreciate you coming on and being public about this on a public platform.
I think that just because history is repeating itself, and that's just always going to happen, that you can make such a difference if you go about it properly, that maybe it doesn't repeat in the same way.
I agree.
Maybe instead of being hunted and exterminated, you're asked to help, kind of like the Navajos helped during the war. They almost won a whole freaking war just because they were coders.
In World War II.
Maybe
they did, actually.
There's a thing there.
Yeah, the code talkers over there in the Pacific. Yep.
Yeah.
And they contributed.
They were scared.
They had they had, in my opinion, that was the biggest contribution to the war effort that actually helped win the war. And they are the unsung heroes of, the Pacific scene. Without them, I mean, it was, there was a code the Japanese could not break because we didn't have a code. The Japanese have broken every code. But it's tough for another time. But I'm going to go ahead.
That's kind of the goal.
Yep.
That's why I'm public, because I feel like maybe if somebody is open about the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, maybe people won't be so afraid.
Well, there's a lot of shows out there, and it's really popular. It really is. And so, I mentioned this in another episode that how my mind works is that it puts things together. If something happened here, but something similar happened all the way over here with somebody else, there's a pattern to this. And
yes.
One of the things, and I'm going to get just a little religious here, is in the movie Ghostbusters, the original one, 1984, and they're riding across the Brooklyn Bridge, and they're quoting out of Revelations. And he goes, "Do you think the reason why we've been so busy because the dead have been risen out of their graves?" And they just got quiet for a minute and goes, "Man, let's turn on some music." Believe it or not, that's one of the few. I mean, I love the whole movie. Even as a kid, I was fascinated and loved it. But that right there to me stood out so much, and we're now thinking maybe there's something to that in with what's happening with the paranormal. And it seems like the veil is getting thinner and thinner and thinner in a lot of areas where it wasn't so thin. Or again, I could go on for hours on this topic, and Ayla can tell you that I can.
Yeah.
So, but the thing
There's
is,
something to it for astrologists. That astrologist will tell you it's predicted and that it's been coming, and that they knew it would start this year. In the next 20 years, it's going to be a big thing like that.
Patterns are there. So, but I'm going to wrap this on up for us real quick, though, Heidi, and I do want to say thank you for coming on tonight. We are going to schedule a part 2 because I do want to get into the necromancy family, almost like the Manson family. So
it's wild.
Yep.
It's wild.
So, but I do got some, got some stuff going on and everything else like that. But we are definitely getting scheduled on that here in the next couple of weeks and get sitting on down, and we're going to get a part 2 out there for you. So, But again, I do want to say thank you. I do appreciate you coming on, and it's very brave, taking a big step and getting it out there. And I love your outlook on it, and don't lose that outlook at all. So,
Thank you.
all right. Well, again, everybody, thanks for listening in onto another episode of the Drunken Cryptids. And I tell you what, please don't forget to like and share us. Give us that 5-star rating. Share us with your friends. If you like the episode, share it with your friends. If you didn't like it, share it with your friends. Maybe they'll like it. The thing about it is you just keep sharing it. The more times you guys share this, the bigger the show gets, and the more encounters I'm able to get out there for you guys. And maybe we start kind of solving some, putting some of the piece of this big puzzle we call life together. So until next time, you guys, again, like us. DrunkenCryptids.com is the website. If you have an encounter, you want to talk to me, you want to email me, DrunkenCryptids@gmail.com, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Cheers.